speaking of another game that a lot of people have a lot of things to say, including us, is the number one video game on planet Earth as we speak, Palworld, the Pokemon with guns / survival game / crafting game / sort of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I don't know. You can climb anything.
Legally distinct from Pokemon most of the time /
Wes, you wrote a fantastic sort of overview about Palworld, about what the game itself is, as well as just the background of it, and then also touching on the controversies that have been generated from it, of people talking about, like, is this good that something like this exists that seems like on paper a potentially like fraudulent game in terms of like, is it stealing designs? Is it an asset flip? Is it this? Is it that? Do you want to dive into that whole report, Wes? Catch people up?
Yeah. So there is a lot. We kind of talked about Palworld last week on day 1 or day 0, basically, like the first few hours of its launch. So we had no idea what it would. We didn't know what it would become a week later. But we talked about it last week. So yeah, it's there's Pokemon creatures called Pals. You capture them with legally distinct Pokeballs, and you can make these Pals basically like do your survival needs for you. Like essentially can turn them into a factory so that you can survive easier, because this is a survival crafting game at its core. It's not a Pokemon game where you're going around and getting badges and stuff, even though you have these Pals. But yeah, like pretty quickly after it launched, it started to take off, and I think it has reached the point now where it is a machine almost like feeding itself. People were interested in this game. They have been since its 2021 reveal because of the Pokemon with guns angle. And I also think survival genre does really well in the internet and with internet culture and Twitch streaming and that kind of stuff. I think it just plays really well to internet gaming and stuff. But yeah, pretty quickly after its launch, it hit a million copies sold in 8 hours on Steam alone.
Wow.
Which this is also on Game Pass on Xbox, and we're not really getting those numbers. So the numbers I'm going to be talking about now, which are meteoric, are just strictly Steam sales. And I think the game is like $28 on Steam.
Yeah, and the game is in early access, so it's not.
Yes.
It's technically not done.
Crossed 2 million copies in 24 hours. And then at that point, it was already in the 10th highest all-time peak of Steam concurrent players, which for an independent team, I mean, that's you can't ask for anything better. They were probably freaking out on launch day about how well things were going. And I know there were server issues, and they had an emergency meeting with Epic to like figure out how to get these servers working better and all that kind of stuff.
Pretty wild when you think about that.
Yeah.
Like they have the clout to pull Epic and be like, hey, we need to figure this out now.
Yeah. 3 million copies sold in 40 hours, 4 million copies sold in 3 days. And I believe the latest update was today. Oh, actually, 3 days, it sold 5 million copies. That number is extremely important because PlayStation 5, Marvel Spider-Man 2, the best-selling first-party game from Sony, took 11 days to sell 5 million copies.
Wow.
So this game did it in 3 days. Marvel Spider-Man 2, arguably the most popular and well-known superhero of all time, sold that many on a first-party system in 11 days, which is like, if I was at Pocket Pair, which is the developer, I would be like, all right, everyone, we are good. We are going to this game will live forever like this. We're going to take our cuts. I'm peacing out. Like, I'm set for life. You're good. Like,
cashing my chips.
Yeah, for real. Like, there's no reason to
finish
absurd. The game. Yeah, like you did it. And then today was the latest sales update, 6 million copies in 4 days. Its peak concurrent has overpassed 8 other games. It is now the second highest peak all time on Steam, which it surpassed Counter-Strike 2 to do so. The only one above it is PUBG. I don't want to say never, but I don't think it's going to surpass PUBG. That's 3.2 million concurrent players. Right now it's at 1.8-ish million, so it would need to almost double, which is possible given the trajectory. But I don't know. 3.2 million is wild, and PUBG was a phenomenon that lasted over an entire year. We'll see if Palworld does that. But yeah, that's kind of setting the stage for Palworld and why you probably can't escape it on the internet. And I think it's part of the reason the sales are happening. I think it's one of those instances that's extremely rare for any studio where you have a good enough game that people like it and they talk about it. And then now the quality of game matters less so than just the discourse and people talking about it. Like enough people are talking about it that enough, that people are buying it. And now it's just the discussion is feeding sales to this game. And I'm not saying that I haven't played the game. I'm not going to say it's like a bad game and doesn't deserve 6 million sales or whatever. But like, I think it's clear that the reason this game's trajectory keeps going up is less to do with like, wow, this is a game you cannot miss this generation. It's one of the best things I've ever played. And more just like, I can't escape this word. What is this game? It's $28 on Steam. It's on Game Pass. Let me pick it up. Which notably, 6 million sold on Steam. We don't know Game Pass numbers. You're probably adding at least another million. Like, it cannot be overstated how well Pocket Pair is doing because of this game's instant success. However, once you get 6 million eyes on your game, that already drew a lot of similarities to Pokemon. The internet did what the internet does, and that is sleuthed around to find a lot of similarities. Before I jump into all this, I just want to say, if I sound like I'm making a definitive claim, I don't intend to. There's so much with this game. I don't want to call it one way or the other. And I've reached out to Pocket Pair, and I'm hoping to hear back to kind of get some clarification on stuff.
Yeah, it's like at the time we're recording this, like anything like accusatory is like unsubstantiated, which is like the big thing. Like nothing has been proven as fact. It's all just been
it's a lot of people
mostly
pointing fingers on the internet.
Yes. And the reason that's happening is, I guess I should dive into the history of this studio. Not the history, but two prior games released before Palworld. The first one is called Craftopia, and it was released, where's my
2020, I believe, in early access.
Yeah, and if you've seen anything about Craftopia, it looks a lot like Nintendo's Breath of the Wild in various ways. And some people think that it's a blatant ripoff / clone. Some people think it's like actually taking models from the game, tweaking them a bit, and then putting them in Craftopia. And other people are like, look, you can be inspired by games as massive as Breath of the Wild, and that's what happened with this dev. Nintendo didn't sue them, so I'm inclined to believe that whatever blatancy or cloning or ripoffs that people think is in Craftopia is not illegal. It's like legally distinct enough, because if Nintendo has a lawsuit, they will make it happen. Like their lawyers,
they will, no matter how small you are, they find you somehow sooner or later.
The person that did the ROM hacks, they were selling Nintendo ROMs, which of course is legal. They're in jail for like 40 months. Like Nintendo does not mess around. There's no slap on the wrist with them.
Isn't he also the same person that's like, even when he gets out of jail, he like has to pay a percentage?
40%, 40 or 30% of his income has to go towards paying off his fine, because it's like $1 million+ or something.
Basically
like that.
means he's like, he owes them for life. Basically, like he's pretty much done.
Yeah. So Nintendo does not mess around with this stuff. So I think Craftopia got off the hook, but Craftopia is being brought back into the discussion because people are finding the same thing with Palworld, where it's like, some people are saying, wow, they're just blatantly copying Pokemon. Other people are saying, these are the same models, you guys. Like, they just ripped straight from Pokemon games and are just tweaking them a bit. Other people are saying this is AI-fed imagery. And then there's people who are saying that, like, look, it is perhaps uninspired, but, like, you're allowed to do this. You can get away with this, and they are getting away with it so far. And it's just Pokemon. It's the biggest brand in the world. It's going to be fine. Blah, blah, blah. I kind of hate... I'm not here to like protect a $1 billion corporation, but I do kind of hate the discussion about like, it's Pokemon, who cares if they get ripped off? Only because like yeah, Pokemon is a billion-dollar company and IP, but like there's still artists who are making these designs, and I don't think artists should rip off other artists. Like somebody created Charizard, a single person or maybe a team of people put their heads together and made that design. That doesn't mean just because it's extremely popular doesn't mean it deserves to be ripped off.
It's like the thing of like the more successful you are, the more it's okay to steal from you.
Yeah, it's
I don't think that's a good attitude to have either.
Yeah, because where's the line you draw, and it's like it's a whole
messy.
Yeah. So basically, I guess diving into like the different parts of the discussion, and I have a big write-up on GameInformer.com if you want to see like actual examples, because there's a ton. There are like very, very similar designs of pals that look just like Pokemon. Sometimes I am like, oh, I think that's just inspiration. Yeah, they're both cats. They both have an interesting smile, like a Cheshire cat. I don't know if I see it. But then there's other instances where it's like, oh, that's like the same. I think I could place those on top of each other and I wouldn't see a difference.
Yeah, it's like it's the same idea of like, okay, this is like a firefox with like a witch hat, and this one also kind of has a similar. Like that's a very specific idea to use, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not for me to decide if someone buying this game is okay with that kind of inspiration or unoriginal design. But there's
and I think honestly, before you leave that point, like if there is any like proof of actual wrongdoing, I don't think the onus is on the player. Like at the end of the day, that's the developer. Like I don't like the idea of like if you play this game, you're a terrible person, because at the end of the day, people are having fun with it, and it's like as weird as it sounds, like you shouldn't support this, you shouldn't be playing this. It's like, I mean, people buy bootleg toys and DVDs all the time. Not saying it's great, but they're having fun. Again, it's on the creator to not be shady.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like Pandora's box has been opened. You can't do anything now that the genie's out. If people are having fun with it, it's just they are not the problem, basically. In it, like they did not commit the crime.
Yeah, I agree. It's and it has become this weird conversation on Twitter, which is a well-known great place for discussion.
Yeah, a nuanced discussion too. Yes.
Yeah. Where it's like there's like Palworld versus, if you have a problem with Palworld, you're in the pocket of Nintendo, and if it's this whole thing, and it's just like
a lot of absolutes.
Yeah, it's like give it some time. It's been 6 days, but so we've got these perhaps unoriginal, maybe uninspired designs, and now people probably certainly much smarter than me, because I don't even know how you would do this, are getting the models of the Pokemon from recent Pokemon games and the models from Palworld, which I guess is like you got to go into the back end of these games and do that. I don't know how to do it. And they're putting the models on top of each other, and they are like, in a lot of instances, 99% the same. So some people are like, okay, they clearly are just straight up ripping the model out of these Pokemon games and then tweaking them in their game to be different looking enough. And now there's like a whole discussion where it's like, well, actually, you don't have to rip the model. There's a thing in development called tracing where you can like trace models, and it's fine to do. And now people think it's that. Again, we just have no proof. We have no evidence of this. People have, I'm sure I'm not the only person at a game site who has reached out to the developer. I'm sure they're inundated with emails trying to get any clarification. So we'll see. The last piece of the puzzle.
They did have some response online where the founder, who was the person I actually interviewed for a piece that I did on the team basically last year.
Back when it was still, is this a real game? Marcus wrote.
I mean, honestly, not to toot my own horn, but I was probably the first on the scene to be like, I think this might be something. I want to talk to the team about it. Because I didn't see anyone else have any sort of like
toot that horn.
interview with them. But yeah, so I was like, see, I told you.
That's the CEO Takuro Mizobi?
Mizobi, yeah.
Okay.
But apparently he got on Twitter saying that the team's been getting death threats from people. Like that was kind of like one of the few times he's responded to this controversy, basically saying like, hey, if you have a problem, aim it at me. I'm the studio head. Please don't threaten the artist and stuff.
Yeah. This is a translation by Video Games Chronicle, which is another site out there that's great. And because Mizobi's tweet was in Japanese, he basically said, we are currently receiving abusive and defamatory comments against our artists, in addition to tweets that appear to be death threats. So not quite addressing any of these specific accusations. Then his next part is kind of weird to me too, or interesting at least. While we have received various opinions about Palworld, it is important to note that the supervision of all materials related to Palworld is conducted by a team, including myself. I bear the responsibility for the produced materials. I would appreciate it if these comments towards artists involved in Palworld would cease. So again, not kind of just talking around the specific accusations, which is leading people to, I mean, all we can do is discuss it and come up with our own possibilities until they confirm one thing or the other.
It's like go ahead, Kyle.
I was just gonna say, they can't say anything at this point. They can't, nakedly address anyone's criticisms, because if any lawsuit were to occur in the future, which I don't even know if it's really heading in that direction, if I'm being honest, they can't have documented pieces of things online of them addressing it in any way. They have to save those discussions for a court, But I understand him sort of talking around things, but also being like, don't give us death threats. We don't want those, please.
For sure.
That's a very reasonable thing to request that people stop pushing towards them.
Yeah, even if they did straight up rip models from a game, you don't deserve death threats for doing that. Don't do that.
It's not the end of the world. It's not great, but it's not oh my God, punishable by death.
Yeah. And so the lack of clarification, or the lack of just knowing truly what it is, how these designs came about, has led people to a third option, and perhaps the most nefarious if it ends up being the case. So in 2022, they put out a game called AI Art Imposter, which uses AI art generation to play the game. Didn't really blow up, didn't really become a thing, but it kind of matters in the conversation now, because some people think that these PAL designs are the work of generative AI, such as Midjourney, where you can plug in, I want a monster that looks kind of like Pikachu from Pokemon, but has a blue color scheme instead of a yellow color scheme, and then it shoots that out. And ideally, it's different enough to not be Pikachu, but generative AI is, I think a lot of people can see when it is AI versus not. So some people think that is maybe what's going on here. And then when they look back at the studio's history, they find AI Art Imposter, which this team has a game that uses a generative AI, so they're okay with it to an extent. And then they've also found other tweets and talks that the CEO has done where he kind of is okay with generative AI, which is a very hot topic and controversial thing in the games industry, and just the tech world in general. Especially as it relates to copyright and where generative AI gets its knowledge from. It's usually from artists that it's not crediting, which is the issue.
Yeah. Someone did bring up on Twitter, I forgot who it was, but they brought up a good point where they're given the studio sort of they have a straight up game that uses AI, it's in the title and it's in the Steam description, they're not afraid to say clearly that their game uses AI, so why would they be with Palworld to kind of possibly debunk the AI thing? I think if it had AI, they would just say it, because they clearly are okay with saying if a game has it that they've made.
I only mention this because it's one of the main accusations being thrown around, and again, we just don't know. I'm inclined to believe that Palworld is probably probably fine in terms, in the eyes of Nintendo. This isn't a game that came out of nowhere. It kind of did, but
it's been around for, like you said, years.
Yeah, the
Marcus
reveal was
told us
2021.
About it, 6 months ago or whatever.
Yeah.
I did. I premiered it.
Yeah.
The discussion around this game from the jump has been Pokemon with guns.
Yes,
people were connecting those dots from the beginning, and there's no world where Nintendo didn't see this game and maybe question it. And I don't think it takes...
I straight up asked Mizobi if they were ever worried about Nintendo, and he said, no, we're good. We don't think we have anything to worry about. He made it sound like we've ensured that our creatures or our world is distinct enough to where he seemed completely unworried that Nintendo would come after him, which probably that must mean something, right? They must have done their homework of how far can we bump against the line without going over it.
For all we know, they might have had coffee, because Jordan Midler, who's a great writer over at Video Games Chronicle, pointed out, it was this tweet that went viral over the weekend. Pocket Pair's headquarters is 10 minutes away from the headquarters of the Pokemon Company in Japan. So like, they might have had tea and been like, look, I know it's pretty similar, but I promise we're good. Well, let's talk it out. Who knows?
Yeah, like the point is, like, Nintendo has had every opportunity to completely stomp this into the dirt.
I mean, guys, I bet Nintendo is more interested in getting Palworld on the Switch than they are.
Honestly,
I mean, like,
that would
that's
be
probably
amazing.
What they would rather be doing than arguing about something like this.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to like what I think is happening in general here, which is there's one side of Palworld where you're like, okay, what's going on here? This is like kind of unoriginal and kind of lame to do. But then the other half is like people who were like, man, look at the past Pokemon games. We got Scarlet and Violet. That's $1 billion company making Switch exclusives, and they run like trash. They aren't great looking. And this independent team has made, in a survival genre, a Pokemon game that like people have dreamed about, which is like this. It's very pretty. The models look great. There's lots of cool looking pals to collect and have fun with. And I think people are just like kind of yearning for this. Like they want the Pokemon Company to make something like this instead of a game that chugs at like 12 frames per second on Switch sometimes. And I think that's why Pokemon got brought into this discussion to begin with, because like you guys mentioned last week, and anyone who's played it knows, like this isn't a Pokemon game when you play it. It's a
really
survival game. Like
I mean,
there are pals.
To sort of step aside into more just like gameplay experience, I had a moment of like, all right, let me check this thing out. Let me get it downloaded. Let me sign in. And it took a couple tries because the servers were getting hammered. And it was pretty quickly, I was like, oh, this is like a punch trees, get wood game. I didn't realize that's what this was.
Yeah.
I think I might step out. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. And the last piece of not evidence but puzzle piece I want to add to this discussion, because some people are like, maybe Nintendo is not watching, who knows like what Nintendo's thinking. Somebody had a Pokemon Palworld mod ready to go yesterday. It went viral. It was just Pokemon and Ash Ketchum in Palworld, and it actually looked pretty cool. I'm like, oh wow, that's a very pretty Pokemon looking game.
Like, oh, that's the thing I've always wanted since I was a kid.
Right, yeah, and that was taken down yesterday night or this morning, and the person that posted already has tweeted like, Nintendo has come for me. Please leave me in your thoughts and prayers. Like,
what an ominous statement! Nintendo has come for me.
Oh, I'd be terrified.
Oh yeah, after that other kid, the one that's paying them money for the rest of his life, yeah, I'd be scared.
Gary
too.
Bowser. But yeah, it's clear Nintendo is watching. Like, somebody is aware of Palworld and what it's doing, because the second Pokemon got put into it by mod, it's gone. Like, that person's probably going to be in trouble, and that mod, you can't even watch the video on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, we will never see that person ever again.
Possibly, yes.
They're hanging out in a room underground with the GTA 6 leaker.
But yeah, that is this wild journey of Palworld. It's one of those games where I know every morning when I log on for work, I probably have a Palworld story or update to write, whether it be sales or some other accusation, or maybe Pocket Pair announces something. Like, who knows? But it's always fascinating to watch this kind of stuff happen and see a game take the internet by storm, and then watch how it feeds itself and just continues to grow.
Yeah, it's brought an interesting discussion about, like, because another defense for this game is that it's a parody game of Pokemon, which that's the vibe I always got from the trailers. Like, hey, Pokemon's cute and innocent. What if we just made it dark by having guns, and it's kind of like a dark humor? And just the discussion of like how far does parody go? How far does inspiration go? Which I think has always been a question for a lot of games, because like so many games now, especially like on the indie scene, that are like, oh, I love Symphony of the Night, Castlevania, I'll make my own one of that because there isn't one. And then you're like, man, this is pretty much just Castlevania. It's got a lot of the same stuff. And there's been plenty of Pokemon style games. And what was that MMO Temtem that's out there? And stuff like
I've seen memes of people being like, this feels familiar, and then it's just like, yeah, we just went through this with Temtem, like.
Yeah, and it's like I think, like, again, until anything is proven definitively, it seems relatively fair to assume that legally everything is cool with Palworld. I'm using Nintendo as the bar for next. Again, if Nintendo found something and they've had years to find something, it would be done. We would not see Palworld would not see the light of day, and so far it's doing fine. But especially seeing them jump on that mod so quick, I was like, okay, so they're watching this game now that it's out in the wild, and that's the only thing that they jumped on was the clearly
I mean that's the other
mod.
thing about that mod. It's like as fun as it is, and as much as I would like it to exist, it's like, well, yeah, I mean I think we can all agree that did cross a line. What you think was going to happen, kind of a thing. Yeah.
There's also it isn't. I don't know how Xbox works and how Game Pass works, but the fact that this is on Game Pass, you got to believe that Xbox did some and Microsoft did some kind of check, right? Like they wouldn't put anything that is going to get them in trouble with Nintendo, one of the other three giants in gaming. I don't know if they're digging into the models and being like, did you take the same wireframe as this? But like somebody looked at it and was like, okay, we can give this the green light to be on our extremely popular subscription service that millions of people will see.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think also, like, I guess to my point, it's like legally, let's assume Palworld is right. At the same time, I get why people are upset because legal doesn't necessarily mean good. You know, like just because something legal doesn't mean it's right. And I get people being upset of like, oh, this game seems like it has a lack of creativity and whatever. And that's probably true. I mean, I'm not a big Pokemon guy. I only know like first gen. So like a lot of the comparisons go over my head because I'm not as familiar with like the vast majority of Pokemon. But I've seen like the side by sides and I'll go like, oh yeah, that's kind of like, and I don't look at that as like fraudulent, I guess. I kind of look more of it as like, oh, okay, maybe that's just more creatively bankrupt than anything.
Sure.
But again, that's like kind of lame, but it's not illegal because there's so many games. And again, I'm not saying that this is great, but like there's so many straight up copycat games on like the App Store alone. You know, they just take, if anything blows up there, it's like, oh, this is just the same thing, but we use different art assets, but it's the same thing, or it's barely different. Like, that's been going on in games forever. It will go on in games to the end of time, basically.
Yeah.
So, like, Palworld is far from unique in that sense. Again, it's, as long as it doesn't cross any legal lines, they can do it. And I think the other thing, but also if you have a problem with it from, like, a creativity standpoint, I don't think you're wrong or should be attacked for that either, you know? I think that oh god, I had a point and I think it just flew out of my head. But I'm too busy thinking about fake Pikachu. But
yeah, it's a weird, man. I am curious to watch it, and I'm looking forward to a period in the I'm guessing near future where the discussion around the game is focused on the game itself and what it is and what it is doing.
That's what I was going to say, actually.
Okay.
Was that, I think I think it was Dinga.
Not yet.
I think it was Dinga at Arcane when he weighed in that he brought up, like,
yes,
even if the game obviously takes a bunch of stuff from other games, which is basically also other video games at this point. Yeah. So that's, again, far from a unique thing. He's like, at the end of the day, it still has to be fun. And clearly, people are having, like, fun playing it. Like, it's not like people are just checking out curiosity. People are like, no. I've seen a lot of people online being like, I don't like Pokemon or I don't like survival games, and I'm having a blast with this. So, like, Dingo was saying, like, they have to do something right. Like, even if they took a bunch of ideas, they still have to slap them together in a way that is actually fun and not just a cash grab. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. He was saying you can copy and paste, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a game that people enjoy playing, and people are enjoying playing this still.
Yeah, it's like, so they still had to mix the ingredients in a way to make a tasty dish. So, you know, I guess they deserve credit in that respect. But yeah, it's a very interesting game. It's one of those things, again, nuance of Twitter is like, I don't think anyone's like necessarily wrong here. There's like credible, like everyone has like credible points on both sides. They just have to stop screaming at each other long enough to see the other side's, point and go like, oh, I see what you mean. Maybe I disagree, but I see where you're coming with that. I'm very curious to see if they come out with like a official response to be like, no, we didn't do any of the stuff that you think that we did. Leave us alone, please.
Leave us alone, please.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, like, Adam, we are super ingrained in this kind of discussion. Like, it's part of our jobs, and then also like it's our hobby that we love a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if like a lot of the millions of people that are playing this game aren't even they might come out and be like, it is AI generative art, or it, this or that. I don't know. There's a lot of people that aren't even going to see that or care, to be honest. So like, it is always, I just try to take a step back. The discussion gets so heated sometimes online and in gaming specifically communities. And it's like, we don't have to get this intense. It's been 6 days. Like let's let things play out. We'll see where it is. And then when we have like some facts and some evidence, then maybe we get back to the discussion. But I guess I know that's me asking too much of Twitter. For sure.
And I'm kind of in a, like, if people are having fun with it, let them have their fun. Again, it's not on them to fix the game or make it legal, quote unquote. Like, I'm not here to stomp on people's fun. If that's, I get being bummed out about, like, oh man, what is this going to set a precedent where you can just steal work and be a success? It's like, no, because a lot of people steal work, and people steal work all the time in games, and you do not hear about it because it fails or just doesn't gain tractions.
We all forgot Fortnite. Just wholesale took a genre.
Yeah, PUBG. Yeah, exactly.
Like overnight.
Remember, people were initially like, "Hey, didn't they just?" And then they shut up real quick. I'm not again.
And then people
that's
were
right
like,
or wrong.
But it's like, didn't PUBG get it from Hunger Games? Didn't Hunger Games get it from the Battle Royale manga? And it's like,
I'll always be forever just a little bitter about Fortnite. Just really wholesale. I mean, honest to God, ripping off PUBG.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It absolutely did. I
say this is a Fortnite founder,
and they're good designers, and they did a great version of it. But there's no denying that they saw a popular mode and took it and ran with it. And that's just what
I love Fortnite. I play it a lot,
super
and
fun.
I often think about how much it has changed gaming, perhaps in a way I'm not sure. Fortnite has ingrained battle passes into gaming. And now I love the Fortnite battle pass. I buy it every season and I max it out. But now when I hear a game has a battle pass, I'm like, really? Another one of these? Fortnite, why did you get popular enough where every game thinks they need to have this? Why? It's Fortnite for all. I like it a lot. But man, yeah. What happened? What's that universe where it didn't ape?
Hey, if it makes you feel better, Palworld, no battle pass. The one thing they didn't steal. Oh, I'm just kidding.
For now, I mean, who knows? We'll see. This is early access. That's another aspect I wish people were. I want to know.
Game's not even technically out.
How early access is this game? I don't.
It's pretty early. I loaded up last time, and my character was a T-pose for a little bit when I was moving around.
Oh no!
So it's an early access game. It shows.